So there has been a lot of talk about potential sabotage down at Mercedes, with George Russell on a bit of a streak of very, very bad luck. Now, I don't think that this is completely unfounded. I think there is some merit worth discussing here, because out of the two Mercedes so far, all the bad luck does seem to be falling on George Russell. As for Monaco, everything unfortunately for him unravelled at this moment here, crossing the pit lane line. Because of the new pit lane at Monaco, with the 11th garage added for Cadillac, it meant that a lot of drivers were being caught out with speeding in the pit lane. Specifically, 6 drivers were noted for this. Lewis Hamilton was one of them. He is way over the line here. This is a much better example of George's. And as you can see from the FIA documents, this was by 0.1 kilometers per hour. This is the same for all 6 drivers, so it is a little bit strange that they were all over by such a small amount. It was all the exact same amount, but regardless of whether or not this was correct or whatever, George had the penalty, so he has to serve it at his next pit stop. What makes this even more painful for George is after the first round of pit stops, he'd actually cleared Isaac Hadjar, so he was looking for probably a P4, maybe even a P3, of course, with the Charles Leclerc DNF later to come in the race. Unfortunately for George, things went from bad to worse after the Lance Stroll crash. Of course, this brought out the safety car, so everyone dived into the pits. As you can see next to George Russell's name there, he's got the red exclamation point, meaning he has got a penalty to serve. Now, if you watch back this with the onboard, you can hear him and Marcus Dudley having a conversation. Marcus Dudley tells him to stay out. However, a few seconds later, the safety car is said to be coming through the pit lane, so George, of course, needs to follow that. George then asks again, because of this change, now do I come into the box? Unfortunately, Marcus does not respond to this. More on that later. This isn't uncommon at Monaco. So George kind of has to go off visual cues here, so it's a bit hard to tell from this photograph. It's a bit of a fuzzy screenshot, but he's got the pit board marker there, the arrow telling him to come into the pits, and they can see that Kimi's tyres have already been changed and there's a fresh set there for him. From George's point of view, why would Mercedes have the tyres if they didn't expect him to come to the pits? And as he does come into the pits, of course, no one should have touched the car for 5 seconds. As you can see on the left, they immediately start working, whereas the right-hand side hesitates for a moment. But by the time the right-hand side realises what the left-hand side has done, they may as well complete the pit stop as well. And because this was a double stack, there was a bit of a slower stop for George at 5.5 seconds, meaning that Isaac Hadjar jumped back past him in the pit sequence. That was until Charles Leclerc had his brake issue going into the final corner, of course, bringing out the red flag. During this period, George was obviously very unhappy with his race engineer because he's now been told that he has to serve a drive-through penalty for not serving the 5 seconds correctly, which is in the rules. There is also a transcript that I'll see if I can find between George and his engineer, where his engineer kind of suggests that he's already served the penalty. Now, this could have just been for the FIA to say, like, hey, look, we've already served it. We think we've served it. We were stationary for 5 seconds. The penalty's fine. And George is clearly a bit reluctant to respond. He's like, I don't think I did, but I mean, if you're saying I've already served it. So, yeah, George is seemingly he can't trust the team at this point because his engineer is not responding to him. He's saying he's already served the penalty when George knows he hasn't. And of course, with 10 laps to go around Monaco, if you've got a drive-through penalty, it's like essentially like 15-20 seconds. He knows he's going to finish outside the points, right? And bless him, off the line, George Russell actually gets back past Isaac Hadjar. So now he's in a net P3 position. And what George does next, I think, does need to be looked at by the FIA. This is a bit of a weird thing that we see quite often at Monaco, where what George is doing is backing up the pack massively. So what he hopes to do is back the pack up, and then as soon as there's a lot of clear air in front of him, put his foot down, try and gain a couple of extra seconds, try and catch everyone off guard, sort of like a safety car restart. And then once he's done this, serve his time penalty and hopefully maybe come out at like P9 or P10 and maybe get a point or two, right? And unfortunately, it was a little bit dangerous for the cars behind. As we can see here, there was an incident between, I think it was Hülkenberg and Carlos Sainz, and then a bit further down the track, Franco Colapinto hit Carlos Sainz again, wrecking Carlos Sainz's race, which is a big shame for him. And like I said, this is we do see at Monaco quite often, the very famous example of Fernando Alonso's DRS train that he formed, where he was just driving like 1 or 2 seconds off the pace the entire time to back up the pack so that his teammate could pit and then get some points. Alex Albon also did the same thing at Monaco. I think it was 2024, might have been last year. And as a result of this, George Russell just straight lined the swimming pool chicane and got a penalty for it. But I think this maybe is something that needs to be looked at. Again, Checo in 2021 at Abu Dhabi, he backed up Lewis massively. I think in NASCAR there's a rule where you, like they call it like the 100% rule, where you basically just have to be trying all the time. So you can't just slow down on purpose to try and slow someone else down. Maybe that's something the FA could look at doing, right? And of course, as a result of all of this, it meant that Kimi actually went on to win the race. And instead of George finishing like a P3 or a P4 maybe, he ended up finishing all the way down in 14th place. Of course, Kimi Antonelli was the faster driver all weekend, 100% deserved to win the race. I mean, he lapped George, for Christ's sake. That's insane. Lapped everyone up to the podium positions. Incredible weekend from Kimi. What a star we've got in our hands here. But this does kind of remind me a little bit of 2016 at Monaco with Daniel Ricciardo, where there was a miscommunication. Daniel was told to come into the pits. The team didn't have his tyres ready. And what's quite funny is Daniel was also talking then about sabotage from the team. He mentioned Spain, the race before this, when Max Verstappen won. won, and sort of said, yeah, I should have had a trophy last weekend and I didn't, and this weekend I should have had a trophy. So if it wasn't clear last week, it is clear now, sort of alluding to a little bit of Red Bull sabotage there. And it's quite funny, there are a few similarities between George Russell and Danny Rick's careers up to this point. Now, why does this happen at Monaco? So the pit wall at Monaco is basically up in the gantry above the pits. It's not the typical pit wall that we normally see at other F1 circuits. And this can cause like a couple of seconds of latency between driver and engineer. So maybe there's a little bit of miscommunication. I'm not sure if there's anything that can really be done about this. And again, does kind of give me shades of 2016 with Lewis Hamilton, where everyone thought that Mercedes was sabotaging him because he was the one with all the bad luck. He had the engine blowout in Malaysia. And I can see why. Look at the narrative that George is having this season. He started out in Australia. He was so happy. Then he was like, oh, things are going okay. It's like, oh, I'm having a bit of bad luck. And now he's just in the bin. He's had 2 back-to-back, basically pointless DNF weekends that were completely out of his control. And when you see things like this, where Kimi's had no power unit issues whatsoever, yet every other Mercedes car has, it's a little bit, it's a little bit suspicious. For me personally, I don't think that this is any sabotage. I think this is just the Mercedes engineers having a bit of miscommunication. As for the engine side of it, this is just pure luck at this point, honestly. I mean, for all we know, Kimi could go on and have 3 engine DNFs in the next 3 rounds, and then George is right back in the title fight. But with where Kimi is sat currently at a 66-point lead over Lewis Hamilton, it is almost looking a little bit like championship over for George Russell, unfortunately. So as I said, for me, there's no sabotage here. There's no story. This is just a bad run of luck for George Russell and a very good run of form. And let's be honest, a little bit of good luck for Kimi and Antonelli as well. As we all know, a championship can quite often be decided by luck. So I'm not taking anything away at all from Kimi and Antonelli here. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this is sabotage from Mercedes or just a little bit of bad luck for George Russell? And if you're new, please drop a subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 10,000 subs by the end of the season.